Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mike Gibb. I run accountsrecovery.net, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar on how conversational voice artificial intelligence helps the ARM industry with compliance and improving collection efficiency. The rising cost of operations, the impact of regulatory compliance measures on fees, and the difficulties of collecting debts in a recessionary economy. Emerging technologies are being used to solve these great challenges. Either enter artificial intelligence, with agencies slowly opting to modernize their IT setup, or with many agencies lacking the latest IT. What are the challenges they face in implementing this level of advanced AI voice solution? Today in this webinar, which is being sponsored by Skit.ai, we hear from a panel of experts as they share insights into how conversational AI is helping all areas of collection operations. As I mentioned, this webinar is being sponsored by Skit.ai. Skit.ai is a leading conversational voice AI platform in the accounts and receivables industry, enabling collection agencies to streamline and accelerate revenue recovery. Skit.ai's compliant, configurable, and easy to deploy conversational voice AI platform is enabling enterprises to automate nearly 1 million consumer conversations weekly. Skit.ai has been recognized by Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia 2021, and it's been awarded several award recognitions, including Disruptive Technology of the Year 2022 by CCW, the Stevie Bronze Winner 2022 by the International Business Awards, Gold Globe CEO Awards 2022, and Startup of the Year in Artificial Intelligence 2021 by Entrepreneur India. Skit.ai is headquartered in New York City, and you can learn more about them by visiting them online at skit.ai. I'm going to drop a link in the chat that you can use to click on to visit their website and encourage you to do so. Let me tell you a little bit about today's speakers. Scott Carroll is a collection industry executive with more than 30 years of operations experience, having worked on the credit grantor and debt collection agency side of the business. Scott has managed very large collection entities and was a COO president at a collection agency for more than 18 years. He has streamlined processes and enhanced compliance while embracing technology, always striving to have the finest operation. He is the business lead for collections at Skit.ai. Nate Kalnins joined the Stark Collection Agency in 2010, working part-time as a collector while he was a student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. After graduating in 2012 with majors in marketing and human resources, Nate joined the Stark team full-time. He now serves as the agency's chief operating officer and director of compliance and oversees all aspects of Stark's operations, including compliance, strategic analysis, workflow design, and client outreach. Nate holds a credit and collections compliance officer designation through ACA International and the leadership development certificate through the University of Wisconsin Small Business Development Center. Nate serves on the Great Lakes Credit and Collection Association Board of Directors, where he is currently the board's treasurer. He was nominated for the Madison Magnet Award and Receivables Advisor Professional of the Year Award. He's passionate about improving financial literacy, particularly among the youth, and he's an active volunteer with Junior Achievement and presents at Madison area high schools. Our format for today will be a panel discussion. This, of course, means that questions from those of you watching us live are encouraged. To submit your question, you can drop it in the chat, or you can click the Q&A tab or button on your Zoom webinar control panel and send it in that way, which does feature an anonymous button if you wish to submit questions or comments anonymously. All right, with that, let's jump into our conversation. So the first thing, let's maybe sort of set the tone. As I mentioned during my introduction, there are a lot of challenges that collection agencies are facing these days. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then we can talk about sort of how Skit.ai and conversational AI can help sort of solve some of those challenges. So Nate, maybe you can just talk a little bit about some of the things, the issues that you see your company may be facing and the industry as a whole facing these days.
Yeah, of course. And thank you, Mike, for hosting us, and to Skit.ai for sponsoring this, and looking forward to the conversation. Yeah, I think the talent question and the staffing question is always something that our industry has grappled with. I don't see that going away anytime soon. Us in particular, we're in Madison, Wisconsin. It's by no means like you're in New York or California of the world, but I still see entry-level wages or wages for comparable positions to our frontline staff just skyrocketing. And that trend is not going away anytime soon. We also see benefit costs skyrocketing. Our insurance premiums are up 10 to 15% every single year, and related overhead kind of along with it. And the job market is challenging. Even if we could hire somebody at these exorbitant costs, it's not always feasible to do so, or to find a good candidate that's actually going to stick with you for a long enough period of time for it to pay out. And we, to tell a personal story on our end, we fully embraced remote work. That's been a huge benefit to us, but it's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. Being able to expand our candidate pool is really helpful, but it doesn't alleviate all these concerns. There are logistical issues with having a remote workforce. There's the compliance related issues with now potentially having different staffing offices in different areas and overseeing this now more robust and diverse workforce. And also we find that candidates aren't always so willing to accept a cost of living differential if we wanted to implement one. So it's not just as easy as we'll hire people that live elsewhere and pay them accordingly. So I think that is the biggest challenge that we're facing. And then you pair that with entering what could potentially be a recessionary climate where liquidity is lower, costs are always increasing, and trying to find any advantage on the margins to perform more effectively, reduce costs, and lead to better outcomes for all is always a challenge.
Excellent. Thanks, Nate. Scott, obviously, as someone who's been on the agency side and now someone who talks to a lot of agencies, every day in your role at Skit.ai, I'm sure you're familiar with some of the things Nate said, but also wanted to give you a chance to sort of share your perspective on where you see the challenges for the industry right now.
Absolutely. Mike, thank you very much for hosting this today, to echo what Nate said. And Nate, thank you very much for joining in the discussion. I appreciate it very much. Yeah, I think that Nate's spot on. The rising, the issues that we have here in the industry with the rising costs, just of doing business has really increased. The push for compliance, which, I mean, if we're all being honest, it was really ineffective somewhere in the last 10 years. Before that, we were working, with guidelines and rules and things, but things really did kind of amp up a bit after the creation of the CFPB. We all know that. And if we're really honest with ourselves, we know that got expensive. We had to build compliance departments where maybe we didn't have one, or if we had one, we had to really inject a lot of robustness into that department. And that became a very costly endeavor. So you've got the high cost of compliance, which I'm sure we probably will talk more about today. But then to Nate's point then too, there really is a challenge when it comes to getting people. Getting people is the number one issue that I know that I'm seeing from our perspective here at Skit.ai. As we speak to agencies, like you mentioned, we talk to agencies every day. And one of the things that we're looking to do is understand what their pain points are. And I'm sure those pain points are what we're probably going to discuss today, because Nate is a great example of an operator dealing with these pain points. Hopefully he's got some other solutions that he'll share with us, and everybody will learn what Nate's doing right, because he's doing it right. And that's the general feeling, is that the cost of collecting is going up. The difficulty in getting employees it's just a real challenge. You could go and flip a burger now and make $18 an hour in fast food.
You're taking a pay cut to be doing that here in Madison.
Exactly. I mean, I'm trying to just kind of give a national average, right? So, I'm sure, in some areas that's going to be even higher. So it's oppressive, operationally for an agency to have to try to figure out. It's enough when you've got compliance and other things that are driving up your cost of doing business, but then you don't even have what you need, which would be agents to help you collect so that you can meet those demands, your yield and all those other things.
Before we move on to, I feel like, not to turn this into a griping session, but more to elaborate on those challenges, especially with staffing too. I'm a big proponent of outsourcing if done right and done selectively and strategically, but that also isn't a cure-all. You need to be able to get client buy-in, and that can be a challenge. There's challenges there related to just the lack of oversight and control, and perhaps a language or a cultural barrier. And while that can cut costs, it is nowhere near to the degree of something like a voice intelligence solution can provide. And one more comment too on the increasing cost of operations. I don't know if you hear this from your other clients, Scott, but I see it internally, and it's almost like cost creep and vendor creep, where individually all these different technologies that we're utilizing and solutions that we're implementing on their own, they all bring positive ROI. We know that individually they all lead to a net positive for us, but even so, it's still leading to overall cost creep, and we have to be proactively looking for ways to cut costs to respond in kind.
Absolutely right. And as those costs go up, how do you meet that and beat that, right? Those costs are going to go up. They're not going to stop going up. And while those costs go up, then what happens with fee? I mean, creditors and debt buyers, they're looking at the agencies, and they know that the agencies have tools now which are less expensive option for collection, and that push to go digital. Well, that's also changed their pricing strategy for the way they pay their agencies, and fee has come down.
Or they're using those same tools themselves and
Right.
doing a much better job on the front end, and the accounts that we end up getting on the back end are just much less liquid. And you may not directly see it, but that stuff's already in the ecosystem and happening, and we have to respond.
I think one of the things that, that's interesting about this particular time period, sort of where we're at, sort of coming to the end of tax season, which I think by all measures, especially with a lot of people that I've been talking to, if they were going to describe it in a word, it would be meh. Companies can't collect their way out of this. They can't sort of just look for more collection dollars or more, more revenue coming in the door as the solution for, all of the problems and all of these issues that we've been talking about with respect to rising costs. It's gotta be, I think, on the efficiency side, where companies are really, and like you were talking about, Nate, was sort of finding advantages on the margins, which I like, like the way you put that. That's where companies are going to be able to sort of, find the solution to kind of get them through and figure out, how to do more with less.
Yeah, well said. And what we're looking for is compounding advantages, where if you can handle one element of the equation 3% better, and another one 5% better, and another one 4% better, each one individually isn't a big change, but now you can, those things compound and build on each other, and now you might be looking at a net gain of 20% efficiency. So like, that's what we're always looking for, is efficiencies that can be gained on the margins that then interact positively with each other to grow.
All right, well, we spent a few minutes scaring the life out of everybody, making them question their choices and their careers and what the futures are. Let's start to maybe provide some ideas and some insights and some answers. And we've talked a little bit, obviously, so far about emerging technologies, and that's definitely going to be a focus today for the purpose of this conversation. But I think for the industry going forward, definitely something that companies need to be embracing more than they probably ever have done in the past, or have ever maybe wanted to do in the past. So let's talk about, sort of artificial intelligence, what it is, and, maybe sort of how it's being, introduced, and now how it's being used and deployed in the ARM industry, Scott.
Yeah, so for Skit.ai or anyone using conversational AI, it is about the platform that's understanding language, the spoken word. So we're kind of going old school, right? We've had so many changes rather, in the way that we do business and the way that we interact, even as a species. And now we're talking about the importance of going back to the standard, which is voice. And conversational AI, that the technology involved is aimed at understanding the spoken word, and that improvement of understanding the spoken word. So, by training, I actually went to the University of Maryland and got a degree in linguistics, which did very little for my collection career. But but we talk about intent in our language, right? The things that we say and how we say it, and that's what conversational AI also listens for. So it's something that learns, and it learns, the things that are said, even like or like being filler words. These are things that conversational AI, for example, help to understand. Well, as you apply that in debt collections, it's a low cost and very efficient, competent way to reach out to consumers, both inbound and outbound. And so that's what conversational AI looks to bring here to the collection experience.
And I know the answer here, but I'll ask it just to kind of simplify and level set. What we're essentially talking about is a voice bot, right? It's an interactive voice bot to be able to receive inbound call traffic and also place outbound call traffic and manage communications with consumers that way, right?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. And so, the voice bot follows scripting just as an agent would, and it carries the conversation. And the aim here is to contain the conversation, right? So from something as simple as verifying a caller's identity to taking a payment. So all the way through the collection, that would be the aim for the technology. That's the aim at Skit.ai.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'd like to put a pin in that containment rate subject. I think it's a little bit too early to bring that up, but I've got some questions for you later on that. But, really what, I think the baseline use case of this type of technology is to be able to place outbound calls and drive conversations with consumers at scale, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we're talking about being able to, instead of having an agent work using a dialer or dial manually where they're pretty fixed in terms of how many calls they can make. This is near bottomless, limitless capacity where calls can be made and scaled perfectly in terms of whatever need is there on the agency side, right?
Absolutely scalable. And it's a great thing. So when you talk about the employee issue, that's not an issue anymore. It's fully scalable. And Mike even said it, a million calls. I mean, that's easy to do.
And, we didn't bring this up in the issues pre-conversation here, but scalability is a big one. I'm at a small to medium-sized agency, and guess what? One of the very first questions that potential clients are asking of us after we get past the data security and compliance piece, it's, can you handle our business? Are you scalable enough? The big hospital systems and financials, they're much like the collection industry where they're all acquiring each other. They want to make sure that they're picking partners that can scale with them as they have their eye towards growth. And that's something that is always very, very appealing to me. It can't just be something that we're thinking about. We have to be intentionally building our business in a way that is scalable, so that if a good opportunity falls in our lap, we don't want to be in a position where we have to say no to it because we feel that we can't do it well.
Right. Yeah. Having been in that position of challenge, right? It's a challenging moment. You want to run around a room and do high fives, but at the same time, you get a pit in your stomach and you're wondering, can I do this? And that's a great thing that we look to eradicate. We look to remove that obstacle. So the answer is a resounding yes to taking that business.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott, does the technology completely replace the need for debt? Does it render debt collectors obsolete? Can you talk a little bit sort of how it works inside an existing operation and how it would work with, sort of human collectors and how they sort of interact or interface with one another, if at all?
Well, we're always going to need people, and that's a great thing, right? This technology is not looking to replace people. At least that's certainly not our aim, to replace people. I think it's more a matter of answering the need for scalability and helping to reallocate resources. And so resources can be reallocated internally. We're going to need people to handle the calls that a conversational AI bot can't handle. Right now, it can't handle absolutely everything. And people can be creative. Debtors, consumers can be very, very creative, and the things that they say and the things that they need. This is really great at handling some of the more mundane, usual, common interactions but you're still going to need people that can handle the more complicated conversations. Maybe they've got questions that are even off script, right? How many times does a collector get a question that's off script? It happens. You get more of the standard calls than not. And so we know that we can take those to a full function and handle that completely. But you're still going to need people, and having those people is extremely vital, right? You want to be ready to handle those calls that have been verified, that have had their need that maybe to an extent, but they need to just have that finishing human quality. We're still going to need that human touch, at least in the industry, for the foreseeable future. Do I think that that's eventually going to come? I really don't know. That's certainly not our aim. Our aim, though, is to handle as much as we possibly can, but it's not a matter of getting rid of people or erasing the need for humans, but just changing that dynamic so that, an agency could focus on the harder to collect. Maybe they've got an asset class that they think this is really great for Bob, Sue, Mary, and Timmy, and John. And, they've got a group of people that are just really great at a certain type of accounts, but then they know they've got small balance or, a certain segmented score that they like. And they think, oh, this would be great for the digital agent to handle. That's the power behind having humans. It's not about replacing them. It's about reallocating. So it's good for the company. It increases that yield.
But to chime in on that too further, I guess, first of all, I agree. I don't see human collectors or the human touch going away anytime soon. We talked about scalability earlier. I think having good staff on hand is a big part of that. You need people that you can bring up through the ranks, give them more responsibilities, and give them the opportunity to learn and grow and scale with your company. And if you stop hiring from the ground up, that's going to stop. It's vitally important, in my opinion, to have that. But like you said, with reallocation, that really is the key. Even if you do the absolute pinnacle of scoring accounts and making the right calls at the right time to the right numbers, what percentage of those calls are going to go unanswered? 60%, 80%, 90%?
Right. Absolutely.
To me, it's about not wasting your team's time on those calls and instead having your team spend a much higher percentage of the time actually on the phone with consumers who need help, or they can help, or they can provide that differentiating factor where maybe the virtual agent isn't able to assist them, or maybe they just flat out the consumer prefers not to speak to a virtual assistant because that segment of the population will always be there too.
Right. There will always be a segment that would prefer something, right? Everybody has a preference for something. This, I think, as the technology comes further into our industry, I think we're going to find more consumers that are willing to give it a go. And I think there'll be different reasons that they're willing to do that. But I think that we're going to see that engagement actually just increase, right? I mean, when texting was first kind of the newer thing, texting kind of, people like to dabble in it, and some are still dabbling in it. Dabble to get in it. There was a real question of whether or not there would be engagement. Well, there is, and it works. And email, there's engagement, and it works. Did email replace all lettering? Not necessarily. And did texting replace having a web portal? Not exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, on that level of acceptance, what level of acceptance do you see, broadly speaking, from consumers? Because, and I think about this from the agency perspective. My ability to communicate with a consumer is gold. And if we have one blown interaction, they're probably not going to give us the time of day or deign to answer our communications anymore. It's vitally important that we represent ourselves well and in a way that they want to interact with that first communication. So what do you see just more holistically working with a number of agencies that you do in terms of acceptance, and what best practices might you have in terms of the type of consumer or that might be most open and willing to engage with technology like this?
Yeah. So that's a good question. We've got a variety of clients that are using obviously different strategies. And that's something I really can appreciate about our industry. Our industry has some very creative minds. And, the way one agency will use it will be completely different from another agency, or then you've got another agency that might do a mix. And so it's hard to speak to exactly what agencies are doing, because they're all kind of doing some different things. But the things that I'm seeing working, would be, I think having patience with a new technology is extremely important. Understanding that everybody is kind of coming together to learn how that can be engaged deployed and engaged for engagement. And so I think that just takes a little bit of time. But what I'm seeing early on here is that consumers are engaging. It's about not expecting, a digital virtual agent to carry the entire, to have every answer to every question. I think that's impossible. Right now, we're just not in a place in technology where you can anticipate what every consumer is going to ask. I mean, you could take the time to build that as an agency, right? But I think agencies have a kind of a very specific angle to how they want to distribute their strategy when it comes to the use of technology. And so that right now, I think they're looking at it as a hand up and not as completely handling absolutely everything. And so, the conversations are designed right now so far to be somewhat short yet engaging, to the point where the consumer knows that they can exit that conversation and get to a human. And they know that, right? Because we've all been trained by calling a pharmacy or a major credit card company, and we hear this technology. You know that you can go representative or something and get to a live person. So I think that knowing that helps people to engage a little bit more, so long as they feel that their initial interaction is being understood. So if when they get through, for example, the verification process, then they have a decision to make. Am I going to continue here with this bot, or do I just ask for a representative? Well, so far, they're not just asking for a representative, strangely enough. They are attempting to engage with the bot. And so that's what we're seeing.
On my end, that's what I'm looking for, right? Like if you want to completely unlock the potential of this, that would be a metric that I'd be closely measuring, is what is that retention rate of the people that answer the phone and talk to the bot? What percentage of them is the bot servicing start to finish? And of the ones that are not failing over, but the ones that are requesting to speak to one of our live agents, what are the reasons they're asking for that? Are they just, like you said, just saying agent right off the bat because that's what they prefer? Or is there some sort of understanding gap or failover or something like that that's causing them to transfer? And trying to keep a close eye on that and iterate from there is what I'd be paying probably the most attention to on the agency side.
Absolutely. I think that we're looking at some generational differences, right, in the way that people engage. I would speak to a bot. My father, he would not have spoken to a bot, most likely, right? He would be that guy that's, kind of cursing and carrying on. But I probably shouldn't speak ill of him. But, but my kids, for example, I totally can see that, right? They're looking for something that's going to be non-offensive, not imposing, something that's not going to embarrass them. And I think that, we will be looking for that as we go forward, using the technology in the space on ways in which we can drive customer engagement even higher for that containment.
So on that note, we're thinking about driving engagement and getting acceptance and having that right tone to encourage retention. To what degree are technologies like voice AI able to capture tone of voice and display the right tone that agencies might want to present in order to help encourage that?
Yeah. So yeah, it does. It listens for tone and for intent. And well, that goes into intent. And so that is working well in there. We train models. That's what's necessary with conversational AI. You train the models, and we train them with call recordings. We train them with real life experiences. And so over time, it learns and it develops and it grows and it understands more of what is being said with the nuance of how it's being said. And so, you've got what's being said, you've got how it's being said, and that all needs to be translated into what is it that's being said? What's the semantic here? And I think that's the challenge of conversational AI, right? And so, I mean, we've got, I think everybody has kind of heard bots and know that, how they might sound. For example, I know that we're working on the way the bot sounds so that it's realistic. And so, I think that eventually there'll be ums and right and like and things like that actually get worked in to make it sound, I'm going to make up a word, human-esque, to make it sound human-esque. And so I think that as that happens, I think engagement also increases, but that's kind of how I see that's going.
Now I'm just curious, do you foresee any sort of like uncanny valley effects or something like that, where they become actively disinterested because that line between human and virtual agent becomes so blurred? Or is it more, hey, let's just drive engagement however we can, and we think that replacing lifelike conversation is the best way there?
I don't think that, I think that what we're trying to do is complement what the agencies are doing, complement what collection entities are trying to do. In terms of the technology going that far, I really can't say. I'm not too technical, as an operator by history and experience, but yeah, I don't think that, I think what we want to do is try to avoid that valley, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
We did have a question come in. None of us are compliance experts, but I'll throw it out there just in case anyone has any general comments. But someone asked, are there any compliance concerns, for example, disparate treatment unique to using artificial intelligence or machine learning in the ARM industry?
I think that's a great question, and I'll give my highly unqualified answer. First of all, I think it's worth stating right off the bat that consent is key here. If you're making calls using an artificial voice message, that is triggering TCPA consent. So that is of the utmost importance as a baseline requirement to even consider leveraging technology like this. I think you have to have good consent management practices in order to do so effectively and without raising compliance risk. But yeah, I think that is like the disparate treatment question is a great one. And that, and Scott, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but, I see that as problematic if the virtual agent were to, for example, have big struggles understanding a specific type of consumer, maybe due to accent or regional dialect or something like that, plus then have the inability to transfer them over to one of our consumers in an effective way so that we can quickly address and remediate their concerns. If we were to somehow find that there's a pocket of our consumer base that is not being treated the way we want them to, of course, that's a compliance concern, but that's also a reputational one, and also an operational one of leaving potential money on the table. So I think those concerns are founded. I don't think I have any great answers. I think it really comes down to following the technology and maintaining close oversight over what's happening, so that if something like that does happen, you can remediate timely. And go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right there. You said oversight, and that's what it's about. Look, no one can just set a technology in motion and go to lunch, right? You've got to stay on top of it. You've got to look at what it's doing, make sure that it's serving your needs the way that you want it to serve, and so it takes reviewing reports and looking at engagement and looking to see specifically how those conversations are going. And so I know that for us, we've got the ability, well, we have the ability to record the call. So we record every call, and we've got a team on standby. We are reviewing, our product and delivery team reviews the calls and sees how these engagements are going. They look at these reports, agencies look at these reports to understand how these are going. And we maintain really good communication with the agency so that we can look over this information and say, hey, this is happening, or that's happening, or this is not happening. So, that's a great thing too. We've got this cumulative knowledge, right, from working with a broad base of agencies. And by doing so, this is working over here, this is not working. I mean, we don't specifically go out and say, well, this is working for so-and-so, so you should try it. We're not going to do that. But when we look at our technology side, we can look and see, what have we learned over here and how can we apply it across the base? And that's what's really great. So I think you're right. I mean, there's an iterative functionality to it. And we have to look to make sure that the treatment is equal, and it's basic, it's across the board, it's full function, it's meeting the needs of the agency. While we are a technology company, our mission really is collections. We're not a collector, we're not a dialer, but we are collecting. And so it's important to us that we make sure that what we're doing is we are making a product and using the technology that's going to be to the best benefit of the agency using it. And so that review, that oversight it's just crucial. It's crucial.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit maybe about the performance of sort of how your, conversational AI compares to a live agent in terms of sort of collection rates, or just sort of overall, what's sort of the overall metrics that you use to sort of compare how your technologies are faring against, human collectors?
I can take a stab at this with our personal experience, and Scott, maybe you can add a little bit more color. From our perspective, it hasn't replaced in-kind human collectors. The average dollars per outbound call, for example, will be, from our experience, a bit lower using something like a virtual agent. But the sheer scale of what a virtual agent is able to do can lead it to easily outperform what an individual agent can do. Especially once you factor in, the portfolios of accounts who aren't able to work maybe to the degree that you want to because you're short-staffed, or just that sheer additional reach that you can get. The aggregate benefits from our experience far outperform what it would be to, say, simply hire someone. And then what I'm watching for, again, on the agency side is kind of like I mentioned earlier, is, how can we increase that retention rate? Because as that increases, the performance of the virtual agent is going to increase in kind. The more the virtual agent can keep the consumer there and be entirely self-contained, the better it's going to perform, and the more time you're going to continue to free up for your agents.
Absolutely. And I really feel that conversational AI kind of changes the game, right? Because so when we compare it with an agent, or let's say agents, right? When we compare it with agents, well, we already changed the game because we're talking about 100% penetration. So we can penetrate we can penetrate anything, right? So there's not going to be a call list too big to call. You could have 30 agents and you could put 1 million accounts in front of them. How long would it take for them to get through it once? And so, we kind of changed the game. I think when you look at it from that perspective, conversational AI changes the whole equation. So then you get penetration. Penetration is a given. So then it's about handling the call. I know that in collections, what we care about is collecting money, right? Collecting money and doing so compliantly. That's what we care about in collections. There's also that really good notion that we're out to do to also resolve accounts, right? Accounts that may have errors on it. We're kind of doing a service for our clients in some aspects. They might have lost track of their accounts, and maybe there's some differences in the actual status of an account. Maybe they really didn't owe it, right? So we kind of answer that too. We come in and we fill so many different functions of that aspect.
I'm thinking from a compliance perspective now, and I'm just thinking, of the portfolio of our accounts that we are actively working right now, I think it's representative of the greater whole, but I don't necessarily know. So, if we could get to 100% penetration, would we see dispute rates change? Would we see the types of disputes that we're getting change? Would we surface any other client level information like that that is important for us and by respect our clients to know as well? And I don't have the answers there, but that's my brain thinking.
Yeah.
I'm on the compliance perspective as well. I'm also curious if any of your clients are using a particular use case. We've talked about it just being soup to nuts, making outbound calls. We haven't really talked about the inbound side of things as well, but we've got our agencies everywhere have their agents taking payments over the phone, and that is a lot of sensitive information being conveyed to agents. I'm always looking for ways to replace that. Of course, there's technologies out there like that already, but do you see any agents using the virtual assistant for that, where if an agent reaches a payment agreement, they can then just pass it along to the virtual assistant to have it transact that payment and keep that sensitive information outside of the agent's hands?
So you've come up with a use case that we have not yet. That we have not yet. See, this is the creativity that I was referring to earlier. This is what we're going to find. We're going to find people like you who have ideas like that, and that would absolutely work. Why not? So so I think that we think linearly, right? We think we get the call, we either handle it or we pass it along. So if we handle it, then we're verifying, we're giving the information, we're collecting a payment, and everything is great, and that's it. Or we get to a point where we pass the call to a live collector, and that live collector hopefully collects it and everything's great. And then you have different ideas, right? Where maybe the agent takes it and passes it to the bot to actually take the payment. Brilliant. Absolutely. Bring it. Because see, those are the kinds of ideas that are going to make the industry better and make the product better. Not just for Skit.ai, but conversational AI in general. You've got a great use case, and that's what I was talking about, Nate.
Yeah, well, like what we're thinking about here and how best to utilize something like this is what types of processes or actions, one, happen at volume or at scale, and two, are largely homogeneous. They're likely the same or very similar every time. Like, I think that's probably the most easy use case in terms of A to B and getting up and running and effective, working the way you want it to, right? Yeah. So, then that begs the question, like the other end of it is, how many calls do agencies get from consumers? I need to cancel my payment, I need to reschedule it. Those are all largely the exact same conversations, and being able to take them out of our agents' hands is a great way to go.
Right. Yeah. Those homogeneous conversations are exactly what conversational AI is good for. I mean, not only for that, right? But that's what I was talking about earlier. You've put that in a better way. That's what we're looking to deal with from the onset, and help lift that burden off of that dwindling staff that most agencies have, right? It almost sounds like it's a bit of a skeleton crew of collectors at most agencies these days, because it's hard to get them, right? But yeah, that's exactly what we look to do.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's not a skeleton crew, but they're more like us, where they've been the exact same size and staffing, but growing through technology. Right. And that's the other way to approach it. On that note too, you mentioned something earlier I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned how you're able to, or the programming is able to look at conversations across the entire user base, essentially, to learn and grow. So my question is, again, as a small to mid-size agency, to be able to use a tool like this, I don't think we have the scale in and of ourselves to give enough sample size and iterative growth to the bot to allow it to grow based off of us. So to what degree is it able to, if we say we've got a portfolio of telecommunications accounts, to what degree are you able to capitalize on other clients that are working similar or like-minded portfolios, so that smaller users like us can benefit from the aggregate adoption and success of this type of solution?
Yeah, so we develop the platform, right? So the platform is the platform itself. I'm going to speak in very simple layman's terms because that's all I've got when it comes to certain aspects of technology. So we've got the platform, and if you will, let's call it a basic platform. I don't want to do it any injustice because well, it's the platform. So we've got the basic platform, and that is the platform that's going to there are going to be similarities across all agencies that we've deployed to, at least. And we are learning from those engagements and experiences, and that has definitely served to make the bot better. So we could deal with a very large agency and have a culmination of, let's say, a dozen agencies, right? And have that impact the bot. And then we could have a whole handful of smaller agencies. And I wouldn't say that you're a smaller agency, right? But you're a good mid-sized agency, good mid-sized, smaller agencies. All of those culminate into the same platform that we're using for the conversational AI piece. Now, that's not the same. That doesn't mean that one agency's bot is the same bot at the other agency, which is the actual outcome, the actual product that's deployed. But the technology that's in the background of it, yes, that continues to learn across the entire segment.
And you hit my follow-up question, so I don't need to ask it. But yeah, having that differentiation, because I'm thinking too, as an agency, I don't want to give away my secret sauce. I don't want to give away my approach. So I think it is important to have those barriers in place, like you described.
Absolutely, yeah. We certainly don't. We're certainly not sharing information, if you will, but the virtual agent platform is learning, and it develops and it grows from the culmination of all of its experience.
We did get a question that came in. We've kind of addressed it, but I think maybe this asks it in a slightly different way, and so I'll throw it out there, but also use it as an opportunity to remind everybody, if you have a question for Nate or Scott, drop it in the chat or send it in through the Q&A. And the question that came in was, do you use the voice bot across the board or on a subset of accounts? For example, perhaps using it on low balance, low yielding accounts may be cost effective versus on large balance, more likely to pay accounts.
I can take a stab at that one. I think it depends on where you are in your journey with this. I would definitely start something with a somewhat segmented approach just to get a handle on it. We didn't even talk about the volume issue, but make sure you're warming up the numbers that you're using to make calls, so you're not immediately opening up the floodgates and getting your calls all labeled and blocked and doing no good to yourself. But from our experience, we've seen the best success in the lower balance accounts. There's just less negotiation to be done. So we talked about homogenization earlier. That kind of eases that process, where if it's $100 copay, that's a lot more closed or open and closed than something that's a $15,000 deficiency balance on a vehicle, where there's now more complexity, more of an emotional component, and a lot more negotiation that needs to happen. I think that there's definitely use cases in both scenarios, but we've seen more success in terms of just responses and payment rates, at least on the lower balance types of situations.
Yeah, and in my experience, we're seeing agencies that want to use it on a variety of different scoring models, different score levels rather that they like, as well as balance ranges. But they're looking at a whole different, and that was what I was talking about before with strategy, right? You could use it so many different ways. But speaking to probably what's the greater success is kind of what Nate is talking about. You kind of get that I won't say low balance, because low balance is really kind of not defined, right? A low balance to one agency is a different balance. So I'll call it lower balance, right? Of all of your inventory. If you take that segment of your lower balanced accounts, and even with middle to low scores. So I've seen agencies that are doing that way with lower scores and lower scores and low balance. I've seen it with high score and low balance. They want to see what's kind of working for them, and we're seeing success in both of those tests, right? In both of those methodologies. And so, it really comes down to how the agency wants to set the strategy. But there is something to be said about that this very simple, low balance kind of middle score consumer that seems to be pretty appealing to a simpler conversation.
Yeah. Also, anecdotally, the oh crap, I forgot consumer, they're going to be much more, in my opinion, likely to pay through something like this. They know what's going on. They don't need to be explained to them. Open shut. And because they're so easy, those are also the ones you don't want your team spending time on.
That's right. That speaks to your margins, right? You look at inbound. What percentage of your calls on inbound are positive, right? They're paying, they're resolving the account one way or another. And so that's something that we look to have a positive impact on. And using this technology, for example, in inbound, really does help an agency to not only handle that account, but handle that account in a capable, compliant manner that will increase yield. Because if you can have a bot handle that call, let's say you get a series of new accounts and you get a placement of accounts and you run it through the bot, and then you get a lot of inbound calls because you've done that. This is just a story I'm making up, right? I'm not saying go do this, but and then you drive inbound calls, because at the end of the day, the goal of every outbound call is either collect or drive an inbound call. And so you get that inbound call and it goes through the bot, and that oops, I forgot it, or that person who wants to take that well-placed strategic settlement offer that came to them in the mail, they can pay that through this process, through a bot, and save themselves how much in commission, right? To that collector. Again, not talking about getting rid of collectors, but just reallocating them. And so in this way, an agency can reallocate some of that fee that they would be giving to their collector to their own operating costs, and having a real positive effect on their yield.
We did have a question that came in asking if do consumers know they're interacting with a conversational AI technology or not?
Yes. Take that? Yeah, I was going to say a short answer, yes.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think at this stage, at least, we're not in that uncanny valley where they're not at all certain. I think most savvy consumers are certain right away. And to eliminate any doubt, what our strategy has been is to say, this is the virtual agent on behalf of the Stark agency, is just to be proactive with it. We haven't done enough testing to have me definitively tell anybody that is the best approach, but that is the one that we've utilized so far.
Yeah, and that's been the experience thus far. Is agencies will prefer to obviously have that announced, and that's generally what I would recommend, is that an agency has it announce that it's a digital virtual agent. So typically it'll just start with I'm a digital or virtual agent calling on behalf of on a recorded line, and so then you're making sure you're getting your disclosures and things like that in. But to that end, and I'm going to get in big trouble with my company for this, but there are agencies that want to name their bot. They want to name it and make it more personal. And I only say I'll get in trouble because not everybody's doing that. So it's not something that we've gone out and said, hey, what do you want to name your bot? But there are agencies who want to name their bot, and I think there's wisdom in that, and I think it's smart to do that for obviously. I think the person asking that question, they want to make sure, and if I'm reading into their question a little bit maybe, but they want to make sure that the consumer is aware that it's not a human, so that the conversation not only starts off right, but then also there's not any kind of deception on the part of the agency to the consumer. And so we're sure to erase that concern.
If you saw me laughing during your explanation there, Scott, it's because we chose not to name it. But let me tell you, the level of engagement from our team, where we had a contest to vote on what to name it if we did, that was the only thing people were talking about for a week leading up to it. So that was very fun on our end.
What was the winning name? I gotta
Shame on
ask.
me. I can't remember. I have to grab it.
I'm a little curious myself.
Yeah.
That's a great way to actually, get buy-in, right? From your team, who understand that this technology is going to be used, at an agency. It's important to have people's buy-in. I mean, you certainly don't want the tail to wag the dog, right? You don't want your staff to kind of manage everything, but it's important to have a collaborative experience. And maybe Nate, you could speak a little bit to how and why that's important in your experience. Why did you do that?
Why do we have a naming competition? Well,
Yeah.
it just came up organically. We're talking to the team about this new technology we're going to be exploring, and first thing happened, can we name it? And it just went from there. But yeah, it came out of just making a good faith attempt to be open and collaborative with our team, because you're right, we need buy-in, and we don't have enough time to talk about best strategies for getting that in as much depth as it deserves. But that to me is vitally important. You need to be proactive and intentional with how you communicate doing something like this with your team, because even if it's unsaid, we can all guess what they're thinking. Is my job going to be lost? And I think we're in agreement. It's categorically no. But how can we convey the benefits that both our company and our frontline team will see through using something like this? And I think that's, you have to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to see the results that you want to see.
Right. And I think also that, agents can feel really good, and they can embrace the technology, and they could get that inbound call, or I'm sorry, the inbound transfer from the bot, maybe for whatever reason, right? Mary just didn't want to talk to the bot, or the call just went somewhere. But the party was verified, and Mary, can get serviced by an agent who then takes the payment. Well, that collector didn't have to spend a few minutes doing other things to get to that point. Just get right to the payment and get that done. And I think that will help agent sentiment with the whole technology as that goes and develops.
Yeah. Aligning compensation around that is, of course, very, very important. But another easy, free way to get buy-in is involve your team with testing. That worked for us. I'm certainly not creative enough to think of every single scenario that our team is seeing day by day. That's something you need to throw volume at, and you need to throw different perspectives and creativity at, so that you can really stress test it. And that's something that worked quite well for us to get a better result and also get buy-in along the way.
Yeah, I think it's important that the agency management, as well as the collectors, can feel that the technology is a part of the team, and as a part of the team, handling a good deal of the business. Well, again, we already talked about penetration. It's not a problem. Account penetration is not a problem. That enables you, Nate, to go out and get more business, right? And you can bring that in, because that volume can be handled, and that allows your business to grow. And your collectors can certainly appreciate that, because as the business grows, their pocket gets patted more. Right?
Exactly.
Well, unfortunately, we've reached the top of the hour, which means we've run out of time. But I did want to give each of you a chance to share what you think the most important takeaway is from today's conversation. If you want people to walk away remembering one thing, what do you want that one thing to be? Scott, we'll start with you. Then Nate, you'll get a chance to have the last word today.
Okay. Well, I think that we've seen the legacy technology of IVR. And we know that it kind of has more of a unidirectional experience, right? Once you're in it, you're stuck in it, unless you create a loop out. And it's a good technology, but I think that something has come along that's better. And conversational AI is compliant, it's configurable, it's easy to use, and it can be easily deployed in a very short period of time. Because of the experience that we have, we know that we can deploy it in a very short period of time, that an agency could be using it for inbound or outbound in a very reasonable short period of time. And that's what I think is most important to take away, is that an opportunity for unquestionable, complete penetration of accounts that enables an agency to meet the growing demands of crushing fee and scalability that technology is here, and any delay is just a delay. There's really no reason to delay looking into the technology.
Well, I think that dovetails into my point pretty nicely, and mine's a little bit more succinct, is that I think that if agents aren't doing everything they can to proactively look for new technologies to improve their performance, reduce costs, and lead to better client and consumer outcomes, they're not doing their job for their client. So that's more of a broad comment, not specifically related to this, but I firmly believe it to be true. And this is a good place to start.
Excellent. Well, Nate, Scott, I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your schedules to be here today and talk about conversation, or AI, and all of the advantages and benefits that it offers, and helping sort of improve compliance and improve efficiency, especially in light of sort of the current economic and industry situation. So thanks to each of you for being here. Scott, I want to thank you and the team at Skit.ai one last time for sponsoring today's event. Everyone, please go check them out at Skit.ai. Excuse me, we're back tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern. We've got our Friday webinar this week is on social media marketing strategies, talking about LinkedIn and Facebook and TikTok and all of those platforms. If you haven't signed up yet, we've got a great panel of marketing experts and people who are active users on those platforms to talk about how they're using it and what the benefits are that they're seeing. You can find a link on the events calendar at accountrecovery.net. So I hope to see you back for that tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thanks to everyone who was here today. Appreciate your support and participation. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, and we look forward to seeing everybody soon. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.